The big plan is done, but it needs approval by the National People's Congress in early 2016. For more on all this, Einar Tangen, our current affairs commentator, joins me again live from Beijing. It's good to see you, sir. Let me start with this. This one-child policy, well, really it's now two-child policy. What was your initial reaction?
Well, no surprise. I mean, this has been something that's been going on for quite a while. I mean, China moves glacially. The whole idea that this is a surprise is the only surprise, actually. I mean, there's this issue about individual and collective choice and sacrifice. I mean, this was not something that was taken on lightly. The government officials who promulgated this plan were also subject to it. So they had to go along with everything that they were asking others to do. It was necessary at the time. It's a reason probably why China is today an $11 trillion a year economy versus other places like India, which has kind of languished at about $2 trillion.
Other countries in the world have tried this, notably Singapore, to sort of encourage people having more kids because ultimately that would be better for the economy and so forth. Do you think this will work in terms of the intended consequences?
Well, there are questions about that, as your previous speaker was saying. The cost element is very big, especially when you're talking in the urban areas. You know, China is really divided between its urban and rural areas, and in urban areas, the costs of schooling, childcare, everything goes up dramatically. So there is a question about that. But in terms of how the future will lay out, remember, we're talking about a time when we could have driverless cars, when we could have more robotics. It's not certain that the old metrics of saying that you have to have a large population is going to be necessary to the future economy.
Yeah, I mean, parents I already speak to in China have a very tough time getting their child into the right preschool, the right school, and so forth. You know what I'm talking about. Can you imagine if everyone's going to have two children, how competitive that would be? Is the infrastructure in place to manage all that?
Well, currently, no, I would say, but I don't know that there's going to be this big rush. I mean, there is this issue of cost. It's going to come up again and again. People feel under a tremendous amount of pressure. Remember, the bad side effects of this is that you have this kind of inverse pyramid where you have, you know, all these grandparents, two parents, you know, four grandparents, two parents, one child. And this has allowed them to help that child, especially when it comes to education, buying a home, finding a mate, etc. But when you start multiplying that, then you're dividing it by half. So it becomes a real question about economics. How much can these families afford? It's a time commitment, everything like that. But you know, China is no different from anybody else. When I talk to my friends in the East Coast or West Coast, they're always talking about the same things: time with the children, quality time, education, opportunities.
Well, I'm not an only child, but I have many friends that are, and I can tell you there is a lot of pressure, including financially, that rests upon their shoulders when you are the only one. Let me ask you this. You've been watching this 5-year plan. Walk me through some of the highlights, the stuff that you really wanted to hear and you got to hear.
Well, I mean, this is my point, is that it's very glacial. Everything that I heard was exactly what I expected to hear. It's about the increase in innovation. You know, China is going through this period where it feels very, very strongly that it has to avoid the middle income trap. So what you're seeing here is they're talking about doubling the income. I don't know if necessarily using these metrics is the best way. China's changed, and when you change, you have to change the way that you measure your progress. GDP is not the sole source. I mean, disposable income, what percentage of the economy switches over to consumption. These are the things that are most important, and how the AIIB, the Silk Web, and all of these projects will play out in terms of helping China maintain its growth potential. Remember, over the next 5 years, they're forecasting a doubling. That'll bring them roughly to the point of that middle income trap level that that historically has been a great barrier. They need to overcome that. You see this in their policies towards opening up and going towards places like Germany and Britain, one to solve issues about financing, tourism and things, the other one for technical and other issues associated with manufacturing. They're trying to get above and be a world-class power in terms of doing this. So everything that I saw along there, the innovation is great.
Some would argue they're already very close to being a world-class power. Let me ask this one last question. What didn't you hear? Is it the details, or what details would you like to hear?
Well, the details of the things is how are you going to accomplish this innovation? Currently, there are some things in there that they say they're going to start forgiving or not charging for technical education. This is one of the big issues that they have here in China. They have tons and tons of graduates who are finding it from universities who are finding it very difficult to find jobs. Yet, at the same time, you constantly hear from industry and business that they cannot find the people that they need. Currently, right now, China needs a tremendous amount of people who have experience, especially in middle management, people who are willing to take on technical tasks. But that has to be adjusted in these next years if in fact, it's going to be successful. There's also, I think, more of a need to stress the educational component of trying to be creative and innovative. I've rarely seen any kind of, burgeoning new technology emerge just from businesses themselves. It's generally been in combination with educational institutions, as you see in Silicon Valley.